Greetings, respected viewers. I'm outside the former Cork County Jail, as opposed to the city jail. So this was just outside the city limits when it was built in 1828. And they drew a sharper distinction between city and county back in those days. Strangely, the city jail was further outside the city limits. You can't see it from here, but it would be that away. It'd be on the north side of the River Lee, and some way up the hill, which is open to tourists actually. It's huge. Closed in the Irish Civil War, after 1923. So that away. Anyway, there's a channel of the River Lee here, and we're just, can you see it from this angle? I don't think so. We're just south of the River Lee. There you can see it. All right, so I'm going to show you the jail again, which was built in 1828, and it had 3 wings. Children as young as 6 years old were sent here. These were very harsh times. So Robert Peel, the MP for Cashel, he was reforming things. He was Home Secretary, and so they reduced the number of death penalty offences. Because here in the United Kingdom, as was, people could be put to death for almost 200 different crimes, like forgery, robbery on a navigable river, grand larceny, sedition, treason, and on and on. But that was greatly reduced because juries were often not convicting, or despite something attracting a death penalty sentence, the judge was usually sentencing people to lesser punishments, such as transportation to Australia, 7 years penal servitude in Australia, so on. If you're a woman who's sent to Australia, you're sometimes offered your freedom on the day you arrived, on condition that you got married immediately. Sometimes without choosing the man you got married to, because there were very few British women in Australia back then. Convicts were sort of like 90% male, because of course United Kingdom, Ireland were all part of the UK back then, so we're all considered British as well as being Irish. No contradiction in that. It's completely compatible to be Welsh and British, Scots and British, English and British, Irish and British, why not? Anyhow, so you see a bit of neoclassical style with these columns. Is it the 8:3 ratio? Although you wouldn't have thought the beauty would be a major consideration, but certainly imposing. A place of punishment, so you shouldn't enjoy yourself too much. So executions used to take place out front. I'm not sure they built up a scaffold or they dropped them off the walls or whatever, and it was a long drop, so people could take up to 20 minutes to die dangling at the end of a hemp rope. Horrific. And it's only after 1868 that executions were inside the prison walls. So it underwent a complete revolution in attitudes. The approach to the death penalty, it went to maximum secrecy and is governed by the Official Secrets Act. It was later executioners in the UK, was it Sid Durnley or Pierpoint, who revealed the details of what had gone on in the death chamber. They were threatened with prosecution under the Official Secrets Act, but that was never actually prosecuted. So then it was handed over to UCC in 1946. This prison was closed. Prisons in Spike Island, which I'm not sure. Yeah, we got a hold of that. The Irish Free State. We got a hold of that in 1938, given to us, and prisons were held there. I remember when I was a little boy, in 1985, when the prisons took over for a few days in Spike Island in a riot, and Spike Island was finally closed about 2004 to prisoners. So I don't know if there was any Cork City jail. I know in the 70s some people who committed crimes here were sent up to Limerick jail. Odd that a much smaller city had a jail and Cork didn't after that time. So the city jail and the county jail had closed. But anyway, there's this plaque I was mentioning previously, which is here, and it's mostly in Irish. This guy, Sean O. Cuivaneg Oglach, as in volunteer, member of the IRA, saying he was from the Cork Brigade. Volunteers of Ireland, Oglach na Heron, that's the IRA. So shot dead by the Free State. Because of course in 1938 the Constitution, we simply became Ireland, even though it's only 26 counties, Ireland, not Free State, we're a Dominion. But you go back to 1921 when the treaty was signed. It said the next year, exactly 1 year, 6th of December 1922, the Irish Free State will come into being as a Dominion of the British Empire, so it was. But the Republican movement, the IRA, Sinn Féin, they loathed this partitionist Parliament of Leinster House, and so they often said Free State, even after the Free State ceased to exist. It was only 2 years after it ceased to exist as such, and saying Free State for sometimes afterwards. I think Unionists, even to the 90s, occasionally said the Free State rather than Republic of Ireland. So, 3rd of August, he's shot dead. So they were digging a tunnel to try and break some prisoners out of here. So they pointed out he was unarmed, so they took that very badly, but shouldn't have have been trying to break people out, because some of the IRA have been killing members of the Garda Síochána. Thomas Og McCurtain was one of them. His father was Lord Mayor of Cork, and he was killed on his 36th birthday. Thomas McCurtain. People broke into his house in Blackpool and shot him dead. Men with English accents, it said, often thought to be members of the RIC, because there were Englishmen in the RIC, a lot of them in 1920. Could have been them, could have been IRA men who had English accents. Some people from Cork have English accents. Or it could have been somebody who was deliberately putting on an English accent in order to lay a false trail. The idea that he was shot dead by another faction of the IRA, that was the Crown's theory, is not as implausible as you might think, because there'd been a row early that day between different factions of the IRA. Anyway, so Thomas Og McCurtain, son of that Lord Mayor who got bumped off, he was a leading figure in the IRA, and when he was arrested in 1940 on Patrick Street, he drew a revolver and shot dead one of the Garda detectives. He was sentenced to death, but he spared the death penalty and released only a few years later. In the 1950s, he's still stomping around in a military uniform. He lived on to the age of 79. You thought he might have been grateful that he was spared the noose. Anyway, so you see here a memorial. This one I'd forgotten about. Oglach na here, and it says at the top, Volunteers of Ireland. Completely in Irish, the names and the ranks, Oglach as in volunteer, where they came from, like Dunmore and so on, and which battalion of the IRA they were in, their date of death. People executed by firing squad behind the walls here, in the exercise yard. Some of them goes on to 1923, and as in, well, one of them does, the Irish Civil War. It's got a quotation from Patrick Pearse over here. So the Civil War, it was June 1922 it broke out. So the treaty had been signed on 6th of December 1921, agreeing that the major part of Ireland would leave the United Kingdom and be a dominion of the British Empire on the lines of Canada. That comparison is made explicit in the treaty, and various other terms. But anyway, so the Republican movement split, and there was an election on this. So over 75% of votes in the south of Ireland went for pro-treaty candidates, and about 25% went for anti-treaty candidates. So that was actually a pro-treaty or anti-treaty. And so the new Irish Army was formed, or the Free State Army, you might call it. A new government was there. Michael Collins had signed this agreement. He'd been chairman of the Supreme Council of Fenians, or the IRB, Irish Republican Brotherhood as it's called. And according to Republican theory, he was actually already the head of state. But even he was agreeing to it. He was seen to be very obdurate. Well, anyway, so then the IRA took over various positions. They took over all but two former British Army barracks, or RIC barracks, here in Cork. What else? Anyway, then Sir Henry Wilson, a very distinguished Irish soldier, he was assassinated in London by two IRA men who were later top for that. And the UK government really said enough is enough. So some leading IRA men in Dublin had been arrested by the new Free State government. And then the IRA were occupying the forecourts in Dublin. They kidnapped J.J. Ginger O'Connell. And so the new Free State government under Collins, well, really Arthur Griffith was actually head of government, gave an ultimatum to the IRA, got to surrender in so many hours, or we're going to begin bombardment of the forecourts. Artillery being lent by the British Army. The IRA said no way. They've been putting up barbed wire. The Free State Army have been cutting it. There have been some tension, some threatening each other, guns, laying mines, trying to disarm the mines, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, push finally came to shove, and the Civil War began on 22nd of June 1922. Exactly 2 months later, Collins was shot dead at Belnablaw in West Cork, quite close to where he's from, Clonakilty. Sam's Cross. Well, I won't go into it, but anyway, it went on till April 1923, so a 10-month conflict. Frank Aiken, the chief of staff of the IRA, he issued the dump arms order agreed to by De Valera, who was still at liberty that stage, saying, Legion of the Rear Guard, the Republic can no longer be successfully defended by your arms. So it wasn't surrender, it wasn't a negotiated treaty or anything like that, but that was the end of it. It spluttered on, and the IRA were occasionally launching attacks against the Garda Síochána into the mid-1920s. All right, so that's about enough from here. So what was I going to say? Over that away, it was known as Jail Cross. Sometimes after the jail closed, still called Jail Cross. Crossroads. It's not actually, it's a T-junction, but there we are. So it's now fully part of UCC, and UCC had rather disliked the fact the prison was here, especially when people were executed and undergraduates were going to have to walk by it. But as I say, after 1868, that was no longer the case. and most of the prison building's been demolished. Just this rather handsome gateway is there. Pity you can't actually go in through the gateway. There we are.